Hello, and welcome to the instruction video on using PubMed and Medline. The first thing you should know about this database is that PubMed and Medline, the words themselves are used interchangeably, but they're actually two slightly different things. Medline is actually the content. When someone says Medline, they're often referring to the database, but what they're really referring to is the content, the actual journals, a very large but discrete grouping of medicine and health science related journals that are indexed and organized by the National Library of Medicine. So Medline is the content that you're searching. PubMed is actually one of many different versions that are available for you to search through. It's actually a platform. It's available through a lot of different sources or databases. You can buy it and actually have access through other ways. We, for example, have Medline available through the Web of Knowledge, which is one option for searching. But today we're actually going to concentrate on the freely available version of that database, which is PubMed. So PubMed is really just the packaging that allows you to search Medline for free. We want to concentrate on PubMed because it's something you'll always have access to, no matter what organization you're a part of, or if you're a student, or if you're not. Everyone can always use PubMed to search. It's freely available from the federal government, so it's always going to be available to you. So it's best to get familiar with it as far as the searching tool goes, because it's never going to go away. Now, to access it though, we do suggest that you go into the library. It's very easy to find PubMed going through a Google search and just looking through that and going to the NCBI, which is where it's contained in the federal government's website. But the one thing that you can get out of using PubMed through the library is it actually gives you access to more full text. That's something to pay attention to, because while some journals are available for free to the public through PubMed, not as much stuff is. And when you use PubMed through the main library website, it recognizes you as being part of the Claremont Colleges and part of KGI. And it recognizes that you not only have access to the usual stuff that's available for free in full text, but you actually have access to all the additional stuff that we pay for as part of our subscription prices through the actual library. So you'll get more mileage out of using PubMed, and it's going to be a lot easier for you in the long run if you do it through the library. Now, there's a number of different ways to get into any database through the library. Of course, there's the databases link. You should be familiar with the main library webpage by now. All the good stuff is housed in the olive bar in the center of the screen. The databases link will take you into a lot of different ways that the databases are organized. You've got an A to Z list that you can access, a subject list, a lot of different ways that you can see different stuff in there. There's also the very quick pull-down most used databases, and PubMed is included on there. It is the premier database for looking at medicine and health science related information, so it's included there. But I would encourage you to start using the research guides. This is one of many ways to get into the databases, and if you haven't encountered them yet, you should have spent a little time here before now. But the research guides are an attempt to condense all the different information and all the different types of resources for different subject areas into one convenient place. And so in the case of KGI, for example, we have ones for ALS 360 as well as a general one for TMP students. When you go in here, you'll see the first tab is the video that you watched before class. But there are a lot of other tabs, and if you haven't taken time to explore these yet, I would highly suggest that you do. There's a lot of different stuff in here. And the reality is that there are a lot of different resources available through the library, as well as things that are available for free on the web. The library resources can be very overwhelming. There are something like 300 databases, and knowing where to start and where the best places are for individual information can be a little overwhelming, even with a subject list. And so what we've tried to do here is pick the very top most important things and put them on here. But then we've also combined them with other resources, some from outside the library, some from inside the library, to make searching a lot easier, particularly when you're starting out the project. Now, I would suggest that you take a look at the bioscience tab, because that's where the majority of the biology and medicine-related databases are going to be housed in this particular research guide. You'll see from top to bottom there are a number of different research guides, as well as some guides about using them. And you'll see that the second one down is PubMed. If we get into this, it'll recognize this as coming into the library. And it takes us to the NCBI website that actually maintains PubMed, as well as many different databases that are organized through the federal government. Now, why use PubMed? Why use PubMed as opposed to using Web of Science or something like that, or something else that's equivalent? The reality is that most databases have a great deal of overlap with one another. Their content, which is to say the actual journals or whatever information it is you're searching, tends to be covered in a lot of different places. In reality, you should know that 100% of the content that's in Medline is actually covered in Web of Science. So if you're searching in Web of Science, you're searching all the journals that you would search in PubMed, plus a lot more that are not necessarily as medicine-oriented. Things like chemistry and physics and other sorts of information. So why use it? The reality is that many different databases have entirely different ways of searching that are going to be unique to that database in and of itself. And depending on where you're coming from and where you're at in your project, as well as what your focus is, you may find that some of them are more useful than others, even though they may have technically less content. Sometimes that can be very useful. Now within PubMed, we'll start out just doing a basic keyword search. So that's what it defaults to. So we're set to PubMed, and we are going to try Fealty syndrome as our example rare disease. Now for Fealty syndrome, you'll see you get 803 results. Okay, this is what a standard results screen looks like in PubMed. It's not the most user-friendly interface that you can get for Medline, but it's doable and it's usable, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. But what I want you to see right now is just the general search screen, the results screen that you're going to get, and mainly to see that we've got 803 results. Now, the real reason why people use PubMed or Medline is for a particular phenomenon in searching called MESH, which actually stands for Medical Subject Headings. Now, in a standard search in almost any database, if you're doing a keyword search, all that's happening is an algorithm is matching up the words that you type, the letters that you type in particular in most databases, when you do a basic search, a keyword search, what's happening is that there's an algorithm that's going out and matching words in the text of the various entries for each of the records for each of the articles that you're searching through. It's just randomly matching things. So what's happening with that is that you're not really getting results specific to content. Okay, what that means is that the algorithm just goes out and searches for stuff. When you do a keyword search in a regular database, in almost any database, all that's happening is you're really just matching words. There's an algorithm that goes out and finds letters in particular combinations that you put in and finds matches to them, and which ones are the closest match that it can find. What that means is that you're not really searching content, you're just sort of matching things up. Now what that means is, when you get results, you may be getting what are essentially false positives. You may be getting a paper where they mention something in the text or just the abstract. And in reality, that paper doesn't really have anything to do with that term, so you're essentially wasting your time if you spend time looking through it in your big list of results that you've got. You also may have what essentially are false negatives, where the content of the paper may be about a particular subject, but that subject is not necessarily overtly mentioned in text, particularly in part of the abstract. What MESH does is it actually tries to address that problem. What happens is that the National Library of Medicine actually goes through each individual article and they assign them particular terms that are these MESH terms based entirely on the content of the article itself. It's similar to the way that if you look just below the abstract in most scientific publications, there's going to be a list of keywords that have been applied by the author. It's the same sort of thing, but it's done in a much more specific and regimented way. Now, the thing that you need to know about MESH is that it's extremely specific and precise, and it will help you do a lot of your searching, because you know that when you're searching a MESH term, you're actually searching the content of the individual articles as opposed to just randomly matching words. Now, the downside of that is that the MESH terms themselves are very, very specific. A lot of different synonyms exist for each individual term, and what the MESH people have done, the people at the National Library of Medicine have done, is they've created a very organized, controlled vocabulary, they call it, where a single term is all that can be used for a particular type of a particular keyword. So, for example, cancer is a great example of this. Cancer does not exist anywhere in MESH. it's always filed under neoplasm. It's an arbitrary rule that they made up. So really the first step in searching mesh, and it's an extra step, but it's usually well worth it, is to figure out exactly what mesh term you're supposed to be using to do your searching in PubMed. It's easy to do though, particularly within PubMed. What you can do is, you've got all these different databases. If you go most of the way down, there's mesh. We can actually just from here look up what the proper mesh term is for Felty syndrome. And we'll see it's actually Felty's syndrome. It's a very small bit, but it's very specific. If I typed in Felty syndrome as a mesh heading, I would get 0 results because that's not what the actual mesh heading is. If you actually look down into the entry terms, you can see all the different words and phrases that have been filed as synonyms under Felty's syndrome. Okay? So none of these words at the bottom here would work as a mesh heading. They all flow into Felty's syndrome. You can also see right here there are a number of different ways that you can start altering your search. You can search by subheading. You should also know that mesh headings, some of them have been filed as major topics. That's essentially a mesh term that's been applied to a particular article as being of primary importance to the purpose of the article. And you can always click that to essentially pare down your results even more, because if you restrict to the major topic, you're going to get fewer papers than you would if you just had a general mesh search. It's easy to add this stuff. So you've got Felty syndrome up. If you'll note over here in the upper left-hand corner, this is where you can build your search very easily. If you just press the Add to Search Builder, you're going to add Felty syndrome in there. And you can actually start adding other things in. This is going to keep track of this, and you can start adding Boolean operators, things like that. But for now, we're just going to stick with this, and we're going to actually start searching the Medline itself, and that's where the searching PubMed comes in. This is where you actually start searching articles. And you can see that of all these articles, we had over 800. Now we're down to 606, particularly as Felty syndrome. We can go back and do even more by restricting to a major mesh topic. We can add that back. Now we're down to 439. Mesh headings are a really great, really efficient way to really pare down lists of articles that you get as results, to see the ones that are very specifically oriented towards the things that you're interested in. Particularly when you start putting together 2 mesh headings, it becomes very, very specific. You can get through a lot of information and get to some very, very key articles. And the nice thing is you know that every one of these articles has something specifically to do with Felty syndrome. So it's a good tool to use. Now, when it's time to actually access some of these things, if we go into the article itself, we'll just pick this one. You can see the general information. You can see things like related citations, related information. And you can see that when you've gone in through the library's website, you can see the standard green bar. And this should be somewhat familiar to you from some of the other videos, as well as if you've spent some time using any of the library databases like Open Science, you'll see this get this item. This actually links into the Claremont College's library's holdings. It'll open up and give you a results screen. This should look somewhat familiar to you by now. And in this case, we have access to the article as well as the journal level. Remember that sometimes article level linking won't work for whatever reason. You can always go to the journal itself and drill down using the citation, so you know that the year something comes from, and then drill down to the individual volume and page number to get the PDF. If you didn't see any of this, you can always remember to get things through Interlibrary Loan. And if you need help using Interlibrary Loan, consult the pre-class video that you should have watched, or just ask questions. Now, the other side of all this, searching PubMed is fairly simple. Getting articles out of PubMed in the sense of the full text is often very simple. Unfortunately, the only somewhat difficult part of PubMed is that it's probably the most difficult database to export stuff into RefWorks. And by export, we don't even really mean that so much as the only downside of using PubMed is that it's more difficult to get your references into RefWorks. It's probably at this point the most difficult database to do that with because it doesn't directly link up to and export to pretty much anything, particularly RefWorks. Now, that's not to say that it can't be done, and it's still fairly simple. Probably the easiest way to go about doing it is you actually do it through RefWorks, through a process of actually searching within RefWorks, and I'll show you how to do it. It's fairly simple. If we go to the main library website, if you go up to Quick Links, you'll note that there's RefWorks. This is one way to get into RefWorks without going through an actual database. Now, at this point, you should have a RefWorks account. If you don't, make sure that you sign up for one. I'm going to log into my account. And what we're actually going to do is go into a module within RefWorks that allows you to search different, usually book databases, but there's actually an option for you to go in and search PubMed itself to bring in your citations that way. Now, within your search, you'll see the different options, and there's online catalog or database. What this is generally set up to do is to search book catalogs, just like Blaze from the Claremont College's library, which is our book catalog. But there are actually other options. Okay. You can see that there are a number of different options here for searching. Now, it's generally set up so that it can search book catalogs, but PubMed is one of the options, and make sure it's at the top. Sometimes it will default to the Claremont College's library catalog. You can limit to the number of the number of references you want to download. From the main RefWorks screen, if we look at the Search tab, there's the Online Catalog or Database search. In the Online Catalog or Database search, you can see that you can choose the database you want to search. PubMed is the top option. Make sure it's set to that. The rest of these are essentially book catalogs, including Blaze, which is available through the Claremont College's library. That's our book catalog. It's a very simple search screen. What you want to do is, there is an advanced search, but it's usually best to take the article that you're interested in. You want to copy the title or some other important information, and input it as part of the quick search. We'll then search, and what this is doing is it's actually searching PubMed just the same way you did going into the database itself. You see, here's our article that we were interested in. Now it's a matter of importing this directly into RefWorks. We'll select it, and we can actually import it directly to a folder that we want. And for now, we can just import it. Say OK. It'll give the same sort of import log as well as viewing last import folder option that you get when you were to send these from one of the databases as opposed to bringing it in. Then here it is. From here, it's just a matter of creating a folder, or if you have an existing folder, putting it in here, making sure it's where you want it to be and that it's safe and that it's available to you. Now you can do the same sort of things that you've seen in other Once it's imported, it's just a matter of you putting it into the right folder or creating a new folder and putting it in there. And then it's used just the same way any other citation is that you would have exported from another database. It's an extra step doing this in PubMed, but it's not the most difficult thing in the world to do. Now, if you have any questions about this or about using PubMed or have problems with any of the different features of it or want to know more about searching, make sure to ask questions, and thanks for watching.